Together, she becomes pregnant. David has Bathsheba's husband, Uriah, a most devoted warrior in his army, put to the front line of battle, knowing that he would be killed there, and he was. Then Bathsheba goes through a pretense mourning period of time that appears appropriate to the masses. Then David and Bathsheba get married. Now, here's the thing. It's going to work. This is going to work out. The people aren't going to find out about this. I mean, David knows, Bathsheba knows, David's servants know, God knows. It's going to work out. Just keep it down. Keep it hushed. Tell everyone all the computers crashed. Keep it down. But the servants didn't remain quiet. And a certain prophet comes to David. Now that happens next week. What has happened to David? What happened? What happened to this little shepherd boy whose heart was set upon God's heart? Remember that from the first sermon in this series? He wanted to please God. He genuinely wanted to. And when he went out to fight Goliath, there was not a doubt in his mind God was going to help him win that battle. There was no doubt in his mind. David put that much trust into that battle. What has happened to that genuinely loving man who only wanted to serve the Lord? He's been too high too long. The thin air has messed up his senses. He can't hear as he used to. He can't hear the warnings of his servants or the voice of his own conscience, nor can he even hear the Lord. The pinnacle has dulled his ears and blinded his eyes. Did David see Bathsheba? No. He saw Bathsheba bathing. There's a great big difference there. He saw his next conquest. Did he see the wife of another man, the creation of God? No. David lost his vision, or at least the good and noble vision that he once had. Too long at the top will do that for you. We can identify with some of other struggles that David went through that we have highlighted in this sermon series. The great courage it took to face Goliath. We can identify with that at times. And then there was that time when David hid in a cave that overlooked the Dead Sea because he was afraid that King Saul's army was going to come and murder him. We can identify with that kind of fear too sometimes. We can identify with David most closely when he lost his closest friend in battle, Jonathan. And he grieved for Jonathan. And he asked the whole country to be in a state of mourning. This was real. This was genuine. This was the humble David that we grew up knowing. But we can't identify with David as king or queen, can we? We've never stood on that balcony, have we? Or have we? Max Lucado, who has written a book called Facing Your Giants, and has written 45 books by now, tells a story about himself. It's a good story. It's a story that each one of us could see ourselves in. He gets on a plane, and he picks out his seat where he's going to sit, and the plane takes off, and about that time the stewardesses, or the attendants I think is what they're called now, begin to serve food. And they come and ask you what on the menu do you want, and then they go back and bring that to you. Well, he was sitting there, he was watching the attendant that was assigned to him, and she was goofing everything up. She would bring food to this person. That's not what I ordered. And she would bring food to another person. I can't eat that. That's why I ordered the pork. And she was messing up just all over. And he sat there thinking to himself, I'm an important man. I'm doing God's business and God's work. I need a good meal before I go to this next city and speak to thousands of people. I'm important. Feed me what I want. That's what he was thinking to himself. And he tells that in the story. He's being honest with himself. And she brings his food. And it's the wrong food. And she looks at him and she says, with tears now in her eyes, you're Max Lucado, aren't you? I've read some of your books. Would you pray for me? This morning I was served divorce papers. My husband has run off with another woman. And by Monday I don't even have a place to live. Mr. Lucado, would you pray for me? You see how easy it is for you and I to get high and mighty and make ourselves more important than we are? It happens like that. And it's not that we mean to, and it's not that we stay in that state permanently, but it's so easy for us to judge another person's faults. And as we do that, we begin to make ourselves high and mighty and beyond any kind of weaknesses whatsoever. David was above all the other people. At least that's what he thought about himself. Bathsheba was something owed to him. After all, he was the king. He believed in his own elevation rights. And he believed in them so much that he would have Bathsheba's husband put on the front line where he would be killed in battle. Bathsheba was an entitlement to King David. This past week, several movie stars got into a great big fuss about having their cell phone pictures of themselves in the nude electronically somehow stolen and then put up for others to see. Why, that's just a horrible thing to happen. That is an abomination. But there is one question. Why would you put nude photos on your telephone? Why? I mean, I can stand in this pulpit for 5 years and I don't have an answer to that. Why would anyone do that? So they would get stolen someday and you can complain about it. That's why. And then you become a bigger and bigger and bigger celebrity. Now, I am not okay stealing things over people's phones or over the internet and all of that. I'm not in favor of that kind of thing at all. But there's no one here today that needs a nude photo of themselves on their phone.
Amen.
If they're there because you want them there. Look, Peggy, here's the picture you took of me when I was at Steak and Shake, coming out of the restroom. A little revealing, isn't it? I bet the people in Trenton would love to see that one. It's that stupid. It's that foolish. And yet the movie stars are the ones who are complaining about someone would have the audacity to electronically get into their phones. Not a lot of humility there, is there? There's not. I don't want the men or women in our congregation upset with me, but I have two facts to share about this story of Bathsheba and King David. First, men have always looked at women. And two, women generally like to be noticed by men. And both of those things are good and healthy things. There's nothing wrong with that. God created us in a way where we're attracted to our differences. That's part of God's creation. Where it gets messy is, what is it that a person who is looking for something, what are they looking for? And just what is it that you want someone to see about you when you're being watched? That's where it gets messy. Neither Bathsheba nor David had any humility left in them. Because of her surface beauty, she thought that she was deserving to be noticed by the king. Because of his royalty, he thought that he was deserving to have access with any woman under his kingdom. They both lived up there in the clouds, above all the other people, better than everyone else. It's pride and it's arrogance, but absolutely no humility. Someone once said that humility doesn't mean you think less of yourself, but that you think of yourself less. But that wasn't the case with David and Bathsheba. They were only thinking of themselves. Jesus once said in Luke's Gospel, "Go sit in a seat that is not important, and when the host comes to you, he might say, 'Friend, move up here to a more important place.' Then all the other guests will respect you." That's humility. It has been said that we Americans are living in an entitlement society, and that is true. We are expecting others to care for us. There are two legitimate entitlements that I can see. One is Social Security, and one is Medicare. It's your money. It's yours. You made those investments. You sent in those checks. It's not anyone else's money. But beyond that, we have blown up the whole concept of entitlement. And that's what David and Bathsheba did, didn't they? They thought they were entitled to each other. What do you see when you look upon another person? Is it just skin deep? Or do you try to see what's inside that other person? What's genuine? What's real? What's been placed in that other person by none other than God, the Creator? How quick to judge that person will you be? Are you placing yourself above that other person? How often do you practice altitude sickness? How we talk with each other is so important. In God's kingdom, there are no bullies who think they can push you around with their venomous words. How we listen to each other is important. You know, that 16th person who stops you in the grocery store and you just went there to get a bottle of aspirin? That 16th person might be the most important person you run into all day long, who needs just the right words from you, and God brings you together for such a time. How we give our time to other people is important. In God's kingdom, no one is entitled to salvation. God will not be owned by any one of us, nor will God be indebted to any one of us. In God's kingdom, people will have their heads and their hearts set straight. Salvation is a gift, and gratitude and humility are the only appropriate responses. Goliath wasn't the biggest giant that David faced in his life. It was his own arrogance and pride. And it won't be long before he and Bathsheba pay a heavy price for having their heads up in the air, where voices get muffled and eyesight gets blurred.